All right, everybody, welcome back. We're moving on to Module 3.4, and we're going to be continuing with this idea of sustainability. So in this lecture, we're going to be moving on from thinking about larger issues with climate change and starting to think about some other resources and other dynamic changes on the Earth that are really contributing to the large-scale changes we're talking about when we're thinking about ecosystem ecology. And this is an interesting study from Dr. Rodel that is looking at estimates of groundwater depletion in India. And interestingly, he's able to use satellite imagery to actually look at the amount of water that is underground and look at it longitudinally through time. You can see he's able to characterize where the largest reservoir of water is located in India, and he's able to look not only at water that's underground groundwater, but also this water that's currently on the surface. And we're able to look at these sort of long-term trends, and you can see that over time, while there is fluctuation in the different water types, you can see that over time we were getting a gradual depletion of water reserves in India. And so this is one of the questions that we're going to be sort of looking at in this section is what other major resources do we need to sort of be thinking about in terms of sustainability? So one of the largest changes that has happened on Earth is certainly human population growth. You've likely seen a growth curve like this that sort of starts way back in the Stone Age and moves on and through the Middle Ages. You can see where the Black Death happened in Europe. And then you can see this massive spike that is showing how much population has grown and how much is projected. And you can see by 2050, it's projected that we'll have 9 billion people living on the Earth. So this is really one of the largest increases that the Earth has seen. And with that, we're seeing a lot of different types of interactions. We're seeing changes in land use. We're seeing how cities are changing the environment. We're seeing how humans, again, are impacting climate change. And one of the critical things that we're starting to think about with the rise in human population and, again, our influence on the climate is this correlates with this loss of what we're calling biodiversity. So that's the number of different species and their relative abundances in the world. And you can see as human populations increase, we're seeing extinctions dramatically increase as well. And again, this is not necessarily directly because human population is increasing. It's a lot of network complex connections between climate change, our change on the physical earth, farming. It's lots and lots of different types of interactions that's causing this. But what's important to think through is that we are still seeing these dramatic decreases in population and biodiversity throughout the world. So when thinking about sustainability, and we know how much an impact the humans are having on the world, it's important to start thinking about how we can think of things in terms of renewable resources. And these next few slides are really just going through how a particular energy source reduces the ecological footprint or changes it in some other way. It just spend some time in looking at these and understanding what the differences are between these and why we haven't potentially used them as carefully as we can. Again, this is more just sort of for your information of these are just different types of energy sources that we do have available on the Earth. So another type of renewable resource that we don't really talk about is water. It's renewable, it's a natural resource, but the problem is it's in high demand. And as we saw in India, much of our drinking water relies on these underground water sources, which we call aquifers. However, currently aquifers are at their lowest that they've ever been. So despite water being a renewable resource, we're still losing large water supplies, and it could be potentially gone by 2050. This is just a map of showing you where the aquifers exist in Pennsylvania. And you can see that there are different types of aquifers and only specific ones that we can easily have access to as humans. So like those other element cycles that we looked at earlier, water also has a cycle, and this is why we're considering it a renewable resource. However, there's only a certain amount of water that gets into these underground aquifers, and that's really where the vast majority of water we use in our everyday life comes from. We know that water is being dramatically overused. We have a lot of water being used to irrigate lakes, for agriculture, and more than over 90% of the world's water is actually used for agriculture. We're not actually talking about drinking water per se, we're actually looking at how much actually goes into our food supply. However, again, when we're thinking about these idea of renewable resources, these things are not evenly distributed. And there are some areas where there's very little stress. So here in Philly, we don't have a lot of stress, but in my hometown in Tucson, Arizona, you can see that it's desert. It's very high stress, and we rely almost completely on our source of aquifers and from the Colorado River, which has been decreasing dramatically every year. Again, the idea behind this lecture is just to understand that we have different types of renewable energy that are available to us, and there are other critical sources of resources that we need to consider when we're thinking about sustainability. So, for example, as human population grows, ultimately our ecological footprint is getting larger. Fresh water, again, a renewable resource, but the world's supply is not distributed equally. And lastly, when we think about sustainable practices, we can minimize things by using renewable resources. And you can see those pluses and minuses of the different types of renewable resources that were available. All right, thanks so much. We'll pick up in module 3.5. Get some water.